Hello and welcome back to PHP Basics. My name is Sean. I recently had a request for a user to be able to quickly pull all of the data from any table in their database, and I knew instantly that I didn't want to have to manually query every table, fetch the data, pull the value of each column, build the tables, and ultimately display the data on the page. I knew there had to be an easier way, and it seriously took me hours of tapping my brain to finally figure out how it works. So essentially, I've got a little drop-down menu here, and each one of these is a table in a database. Whenever I submit that, it's going to pull all the information, including the headers, from every table. And this whole thing is about 40 lines of code. So when you talk about efficiency, this is the way to go, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. So the first thing that I'm going to do is connect to my database, and I'm just going to include my database file, which is db.inc.php. And we can take a look at that real quick over here. I'm trying to create a new variable, which is a new instance of a PDO class. The driver is MySQL. The host name is localhost. My database name is called Classic Models. Username, password. If that fails, we're going to catch the exception, kill the script, and display that message on the screen. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just simply query my database. I'll create a variable called result, and that's just going to be a DB query, and I'll select all from customers. And this can really be anything you want. So the first thing that I'm going to do is fetch all the results from that. So I'll just say all equals results fetch all. And this is going to return all rows, columns, values. And what I can do is I can just simply print R all and take a look at that on screen. And we can see here that this is just one big old mess, right? So what we can do is actually throw the pre-tag in front of that and clean that up just a little bit. So let's take a look at that again. So now we can see an array with position 0, 1 through however many there happen to be. And then within that array, there is another array. So we've got this array up here, which includes these keys. And then the value of this key is actually another array where we have a position of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 12. So that means that there are 13 columns in this particular table. However, we see the position of 0, but we also see that it has an ID name of customer name, or customer number in this case, and they equal the same thing. So we have to compensate for that whenever we're actually getting the correct number of columns in each table. So now in order to get the column names, we kind of need to filter this down to where we're working with just one row and one set of values and data from that row. So what we can do is we can just say call equals all, and then we're just going to pull the first instance of that array. Okay, so now what I can do is print call, and we can see now we're just working with one result. But as I said before, we still have twice as many values in this array as we actually need to. So let's work on that. So what I can do is I can do a for each, and we'll just say call as key and value. So we're going to be able to work with both of these values. So I could simply say echo key and then do a line break or something. And then we get something like that. All we really have to do is filter out the non-integers and throw them into their own array. All right, so what I'll do is I'll create a new array. We'll just call columns, and that's just going to equal an array for now. Down here, I can say if is string key, then we're simply just going to push that into the columns array. So columns and then equals key. So now if I come down here and I print our columns, let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now we can see that what used to be our key is now our value, and we have a numerical position of that array, and that's what we can actually reference whenever we're building this out. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and do for each columns as value, because we don't need the key anymore. We could simply echo value and put a space between each one. And now we have all of the headers for our columns or our column names. All right, so what if we were working with a table? Let's just say we echo out a table. We'll actually give it a border of 1, and we'll just put table headers around this. So th and th, and take a look at this again. And now we have the beginning of our table. Okay, so now let's think about how we're going to populate the data inside of this table. We know we're going to have a for loop that's going to go through every row of that database or that table. We also need another for loop that's going to loop through each column of that particular row. So right away, I know that we're going to need a for loop inside of a for loop, also known as a nested for loop. Okay, so let's create a for loop. We'll just say for x equals 0, and x is going to be less than something, and then x plus plus. Right now we're looking at the table rows, so we need to know the number of rows inside of all of our results. Well, that's simple. We could just say less than the count of all. All right, and I think that was 121 or 122 records. So for each one of those, we're going to echo a table row, and ultimately we're going to end that as well. And then inside of here, we're going to create another for loop. Y is equal to 0, y is less than something, and then y plus plus. All right, so here's where I guess the tricky part would come in. And if you've seen my tricks with for loops video, I kind of dive into nested for loops a little bit there and explain that in a little more detail. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to echo some table data. So this is going to be our column or our cell data right here. First off, let's take a look at what our y value is going to be. And that's simply going to be the count of columns. So basically we have so many rows down, and then we've got so many columns across. So now what kind of information needs to come in here? Well, if we looked back at that first array value, whenever we printed off all, we had an array inside of an array. So the first row was array 0, and then the first column was also 0. So it would be position 0 of position 0, and that's essentially what we're going to do here. So we're going to echo out all, and then the value of the row, and then the value of the column, and then we'll close that row, or I'm sorry, that cell. So now let's take a look at our page, and we can see that it's populated our database for us. So that's grabbed all of the column names from each column in the table, every row, and we can see that it's populated the correct number of rows, it's created the correct number of columns. And here's what's really cool about this. I can come in here and change customers to employees, and it's automatically going to update with that information there. So we've essentially used less than 35 lines of code to display pretty much everything without knowing one single column in the table. So I hope this is something that you can find useful and implement it into your own coding. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.